Ladies and gentlemen, I do not intend to make a long speech, but essentially to say it gives us great pleasure to be here. As the Honourable Minister of Agriculture highlighted, in particular with COVID-19, it has brought home a number of home truths, if you like, because countries, of course, were locked down, borders were closed, trade became limited, your ability to and access the supply chains became limited, and of course there has been widespread unemployment. There's been widespread unemployment throughout the world, including all the major economies, including the metropolitan countries. Countries, for example, like Australia saw within a month 600,000 people becoming unemployed. We, of course, in our case, in particular in the tourism sector, we saw a number of people becoming unemployed. At one point in time, the estimates were about 125,000 people in Fiji who became actually unemployed or had drastically reduced hours as far as employment was concerned. This has had a spiraling effect in respect of their disposable income or lack of it or accessibility to it, and at the same time it has spiraling effect on many of the other ancillary services that are dependent on the tourism sector, that are dependent on the tourism sector. And it has had an impact, wider impact generally on the economy in terms of demand for goods and services. And therefore it has meant a lot of people have had to look for alternative sources of livelihood. And many people therefore have actually turned to the agricultural sector. From one perspective it was very positive. We saw people who had left their, traditionally what we call the teiteis or their subsistence farming, they had left that, more heavily dependent on buying agricultural produce themselves. A lot of them were now actually returning to and doing those activities or those teiteis, those subsistence farming themselves. People started growing food, even in the suburbs, in Suva, the suburb areas of Nandera and various other places. And as part of that, government had said through the Ministry of Agriculture that we'll make seeds available. Over 30,000 people actually have been assisted from that perspective, what we call the backyard gardening. But there's a more substantial aspect to agriculture, of course, too, and that is, as the Minister highlighted, we need to look at the supply chains, the value adding in the agricultural sector. In Fiji, we have traditionally for decades actually not looked at very seriously the value adding that can take place in Fiji before we actually send out those produce offshore. I think the fact that we have this the particular theme of the Agriculture Roadshow, grow, nourish, sustain together, is actually quite fitting, because we need to obviously grow as a country, but we also need to grow agricultural produce. We need to nourish each other, assist each other, but also we need to provide, agricultural produce provides nourishment to us. It will provide sustainability, and of course all of this can be done together as a nation. We today, Fiji, see that various parts of Fiji have different agricultural focus. In the Western Division, of course, you see there's a lot of sugarcane. You also have for example, in this area, in Tailevu area, you have a lot of people who, for example, are involved in the dairy industry and various other sort of vegetable produce. We have in other parts of Fiji where people are growing yangona, which gives very good returns. As a result of that, we have seen, if you compare the same period, the first 6 months of this year, and you compare to the same 6 months of last year, our agricultural output, in fact exports, has grown. I think in excess of about 7%, if not more. So therefore there's an opportunity for us. When we had the borders closed, and the borders are still to an extent closed, and the freight flights on Fiji Airways, 80 to 85% of the freight that used to go out was actually all agricultural produce. So there is potential in that. There is also the potential, as we have seen, a number of the areas of within the agriculture sector itself that can actually be grown and brought up into what we call a secondary stage. So we've talked about, for example, in the area of animal husbandry, in the area of, for example, meat production, things like goats. There's enormous potential in supply of goat meat, having it very seriously done in a very professional manner. At the moment, when people want to eat goat meat, they simply go out to a farm and somebody kills a goat and then bring it over to your home. as opposed to it being available through a supply chain, through production, massive production, available in supermarkets, well packaged. We see that goat meat currently is being imported from New Zealand, when we have the potential to grow goat meat in Fiji, of course. There's, of course, the cattle industry, and there's, of course, piggery, enormous potential in those areas. We also want to be able to suggest that there are many areas in the agriculture sector that has been overlooked for a number of years, and no value adding has been done. Nor has there been any sort of serious production or serious attempt to actually have orchards. So, for example, if you look at breadfruit, how many of us actually know of a breadfruit orchard? How many of us actually know that, what we call EV, that there are actually EV trees grown systematically where we can then, have the harvest every year? How many of us actually know that there's jackfruit orchards? How many of us actually have seen jackfruit orchards in Fiji? There's actually none. If you go to places like Thailand, they actually can jackfruit. We have the ability to, of course, capitalize on the Fijian brand. The Fijian brand is enormously popular. You mentioned the word Fiji. It conjures up very positive emotions. People think about pristine environment. People think about organic farming. And those are the areas that we can actually capitalize on and be able to send our produce offshore, and also to ensure that people in Fiji start actually having availability to those sorts of produce. The government's focus is in this area. If you look at the agricultural show, the idea is to enhance knowledge. The idea for the farmers, potential farmers, the idea, of course, is for farmers to actually think about things like the health of the soil. And I know the Ministry of Agriculture is carrying out a particular project where they'll be assisting farmers in terms of increasing the value of the output of your soil, so you know exactly what to plant, what not to plant, what are the nutrients that are missing, what nutrients need to be actually put in. So it's an enormous task the Ministry of Agriculture has taken. I'd like to actually compliment the Ministry of Agriculture, the Minister, the Assistant Minister, and secondly, in respect of the new drive that's actually taken place, getting out to the grassroots, but at the same time bringing a particular sophisticated approach to agriculture and a more nuanced approach to ensuring that the various aspects of agriculture are actually addressed. So I think the fact that the mic went off was my cue to actually bring this speech to an end. But I'd like to thank all of you. I'd like to in particular thank the development partners for their presence here. As you can see, there's a lot of potential. We like to work together with you. I know I see the European ambassador here. The EU has actually worked quite closely with us in this particular aspect, and we look further to the further contribution. FAO is represented here, and various other organizations. And the Indonesian ambassador is here also. They've done some work, for example, with our women in seaweed farming, in the byproducts from that. But ladies and gentlemen, there is an issue with agriculture. One of the key issues with agriculture at the moment is that we have an aging farmer population. So our drive is to attract more younger people to the agriculture sector. There's enormous amounts of money to be made in the agricultural sector. It's a cash crop. I can tell you numerous stories about Yangona farmers some of them becoming potentially millionaires overnight with a very big harvest. The kind of dollars they're getting for it. And you saw the young men, and I think there's some women there too, who actually in the Nausori Agricultural School, who are being given various incentives. And we need a younger crop of farmers to get into the agriculture sector to ensure sustainability of it, because we need people on the ground as far as agriculture is concerned. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending this particular show. This agriculture show, of course, kicks off here and goes off onto the Western Division and the Northern Division. And we look forward to your assistance, your participation, in the ability to tell others about what can be done and what indeed can be achieved through the agriculture sector. Thank you very much.
Big round of applause.
Turmeric, ginger, and
I drink this every morning.
3 different gingers.
Yeah, we are making our own.
Cheers. Cheers.
No alcohol, huh? Ah, that's for me. That is good. That... 1, 2, 3. Just drop funding. You're going to funding. This is for commercial. I'm going to the factory tomorrow. We're going to have a new truck. Plus they're also going to repaint their loans. 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh, actually, yeah, well, that's what you need. Are you in the PPN? You know. 1, 2, 3. Nice. You use the pen. Use the pen. Rubber pen.
Problem in the Tabua.
2, 3. We've given them the dryer, sir. They've got the dryer?
Oh,
Yep, they've already got it.
medicines, paperwork, thanks to watching soap. So you get those for the kids.
Go. 1, 2, 3.